Hello, Bob Van Rossum with Market Pro. And as we sit here in October of 2025, we're definitely seeing an increase, right, in the number of searches that we're doing that are confidential. And we're getting a lot of questions from clients through that process, right? Chief Human Resources Officers, hiring managers, senior level individuals who are hiring and want to understand what does that mean for the search process. In some cases, they've done a confidential search before and they want to know how we manage it. And in some cases, they haven't done a confidential search before and they want to understand the process, right? So first, let's just start with a definition. Confidential search is a really simple way of saying, hey, we've got someone in the role today and we don't want them to know that we are in the process of searching for their replacement. So the search itself needs to stay confidential until we've shared with that individual that they're no longer going to be with us in the future, or hopefully that we're working to find them a different opportunity within our organization, right? But at the end of the day, they won't be in this role. So therefore now we need the search to be treated as confidential. And I'd say historically, on average, 30% of the searches we work on are confidential. And that means we've now done hundreds of them at this point in time. And now though, right, we're seeing it's a higher percentage of our searches are confidential than is average, which is kind of what's prompted this video. So how does that change our process, right? So we have a search, then we're not supposed to disclose, or we don't want to disclose the client's information to as many candidates as we might otherwise, or as early in the process as we might otherwise, if the search itself didn't have those restrictions, right? The good news is you get to the level we're working at, half of our work is chief marketing officers. The other half is senior level marketers in e-commerce, digital, product, communications, advertising, brand, performance marketing. Those are all the areas, anything in that marketing arena is the area that we work in. And they all understand, and they've gotten to a level in their career where they understand the importance of relationships. They understand the importance of, being sensitive in such situations, right? But even with that said, we're still going to wait, right, much farther into the process, before we disclose who the client is. And so once we do disclose who the client is, or ahead of disclosing who the client is, we're going to do some form of an NDA. In most instances, I'd say about 2/3 of the time, we just do a verbal NDA. And we ask them basically verbally to not disclose the name of the client to anyone during this process. And we understand they're going to discuss it, right, with a significant other potentially. But outside of that, we don't want anyone to know that the search is ongoing. And we don't want it to become any sort of public information through social media, et cetera, right? And that works, right? The verbal NDA process works. And as I've said, we've never had one become public before it was supposed to. Some clients, and we just offer clients the option, right? Some clients prefer we do a written NDA. And so at that point in time, we do a written NDA with electronic signatures. And either way for us is fine. What the reality is, right, is whether it's a verbal NDA or a written NDA, is the NDA itself, right, is unenforceable. And the reason for that is pretty simple. The reason for that is if there's no money changing hands in the transaction, right, then there's nothing that leads to enforceability of that agreement. So at the end of the day, right, you can do a verbal NDA or you can do a written NDA. And really what you're counting on is that individual person that you've spoken to's professionalism. Right? And the fact that they're going to understand, hey, I'm being brought into a process in confidence, and I am going to be a good steward of that confidence, and I'm going to keep that confidence and trust so that I'm not the person who is putting this opportunity at risk for myself or putting the situation out there for someone to learn in an uncomfortable manner that their role is not going to be the same going forward. It's just not the right way to do things, right? So we find that candidates tend to honor that when presented with it in a professional way. And you can do it professionally as a verbal NDA, you can do it professionally as a written NDA. Either way works. It's whatever our client's comfort level is what we end up doing. So then what does that mean, right? one of the things that's really important to us as a search firm is that we move as quickly as we possibly can through the process without shorting quality of the outcome, right? So the most important thing is that you get the best slate of candidates possible. And then from there, how do we do that in the most time efficient manner? And we, as a marketing specific executive search firm, we average about half the time it takes to fill searches than the industry as a whole. Right? And so this number may be different in an organization that processes work more traditionally than we do. And the reason why we're much faster is we only let our team manage half to less than half the number of searches at one time that the industry does, right? And so it's pretty simple bandwidth math, right? If you have a person and they're doing a certain number of interviews, there's only a certain number of those they can do in a day. And the more searches you put on their plate, the longer the process is going to take. The fewer searches you put on their plate, the faster we're going to be able to move. And we put, really at a maximum on some of our team members whose workload is very intense for a search. We don't let them manage 2 searches at a time. And that's worked really well in both their job satisfaction and really well in how fast we can move in getting the client the candidates they need to be successful. So now take that non-confidential search to confidential search, right? Which is where this whole conversation started. For a non-confidential search, right? What we promise our clients is by week 4, we're going to start presenting candidates to you. And by week 6, we'll have a full shortlist to you. And that then means it's going to take them typically about the same amount of time to get through the interview process. And we're going to be hiring a very senior leader in somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks. And a lot of that depends on, it's typically 8 to 10 for small to mid-sized organizations and 10 to 12 for mid to large organizations. So our ability to deliver very quickly is important. While I said we promised week 4, right? In the last 4 years, every search we've done, we've begun to deliver candidates week 3. Now, the exception to that is it can be a confidential search, right? It's really going to make things slow down 3 to 4 business days in our process because we are waiting later to share with the candidates who the client is. And therefore, the candidates are waiting later to decide if they're interested, right? They need some time after our conversation to be able to understand who the client is. Is this a role and an opportunity that's a good fit for me as the next step in a career? And then decide, yes, this is something I want to pursue, especially if that includes a relocation, right? And so, we're going to end up being slowed down 3-4 business days, confidential search versus non-confidential search. So that's kind of everything there is on confidential searches. And, it's always interesting for us, whether it's a confidential search or a non-confidential search, those are all parts of the puzzle pieces that we get to figure out to help our clients win and find the best talent. And that's what makes what we do interesting.